Hanno ingresso il Presidente della Repubblica Italiana.
Now entering the hall, the President of the Italian Republic and Her Majesty Mathilde, the Queen of Belgium.
La Reine de Belge entre dans la salle. Please welcome the President of the Italian Republic and Her Majesty, the Queen of the Belgians.
Signore Presidente della Repubblica Sergio Mattarella,
Mr. President of the Italian Republic, Sergio Mattarella, Your Majesty Mathilde, Queen of the Belgians, Professor Andrea Riccardi, eminent representatives of great world faiths, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I have the honor of welcoming you to the 39th International Meeting for Peace, opening today with this inaugural assembly in this beautiful music hall at Sant'Egidio. We're gathered here from 50 world countries in view of a new step towards the peace for men and women of the great world faith, of culture, of civil society, and of institutions, together with thousands of participants who will be gathered here and online during the 3 days of this meeting. I'm told about 10,000 of them.
una nuova tappa
A new leg in our trip
di un pellegrinaggio
of our uninterrupted pilgrimage, inaugurated on October 27, 1986, by then Pope John Paul II in Assisi, the city of St. Francis, and which has continued since from city to city. Thank you to all of you for being here in Rome. After the memorable meeting last year in Paris, whose memory is still alive with us, here we are back in Rome in the year of the Jubilee, to dare peace together, because we would like to bring a solution to wars and conflicts and show everyone that there's always a different path possible than that of the military response of war, of conflict. And that's the path of dialogue, overcoming misunderstandings, incomprehension, division, and hatred. This is the path that we dare tread together for the past 40 years. These are going to be 2.5 days of dialogue that will continue every day in all of the forums We will continue by giving a voice to the millions of victims of the many conflicts and wars. We shall pray for the gift of peace on Tuesday afternoon. Each one of us in his or her religious faith, and in particular with Pope Leo XIV. At the inauguration of this meeting, I have the honor of handing the floor to the Mayor of Rome, Mr. Roberto Gualtieri.
Roma è in questi giorni.
In these days, the city of Rome is a city of peace.
Grazie.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for your presence and for your greetings. Mr. President of the Republic, Your Majesty, Your Eminencies, Your Excellencies, civil and religious authorities, distinguished guests, dear friends of the community of Sant'Egidio. It is a great honor for me to bring you greetings from Rome to this prestigious meeting dedicated to peace on the 60th anniversary of the Declaration Nostra Aetate, born of the Second Vatican Council. Peace is Rome's highest calling, and it is essential that in such hard times as ours, our city, which is the center of the Catholic Church and where a variety of cultures and faiths coexist peacefully, that our city continues to raise its voice in favor of friendship, understanding, and solidarity among peoples. We will never resign ourselves to the idea that war can become a means of settling international disputes. We will not yield to the spirit of power that seeks to erase the law, or rather, to make itself into the law. We will not resign ourselves to hatred, to fundamentalism that denies the dignity of others, to the end that justifies any means in view of asserting itself. Some might say that the efforts of those who fight for peace clash with the harsh reality of conflict. We do not intend to flee from reality, far from that. We are aware of the complexity and effort involved in any construction process, but we are here to say that if we look at the world honestly, there's nothing more realistic than the commitment to peace. That is the only way to ensure a future of security and dignity for all. True, wars and resurgent imperialist logics are dramatically weakening international law and multilateralism, which is its necessary context. But those images of devastation and death coming from so many places and even from very close to us are proof that we cannot abandon that hope for peace and those paths to peace that have nourished our recent history. Dialogue between religions can become a lever for building peace where opposition and hatred are rooted today. Peace is a daily commitment, but it's also a force of history which passes through the responsibility of institutions, communities, and citizens. This initiative, promoted by the community of Sant'Egidio and brings together religious leaders, people of culture, politicians, and political representatives, is a living, concrete, and tangible testimony to the possibility, indeed, to the reality or realism of peace, dialogue, and cooperation. The city of Rome wants to be the capital of peace and brotherhood among peoples, and it stands on your side. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now to introduce these days, we'll listen to Professor Andrea Riccardi, the tireless promoter of the spirit of Assisi, a man of dialogue and of peace. Thank you for taking the floor before this assembly and for inviting us to dare peace. Mr. President of the Republic, Your Majesty, Your Holiness, Your Beatitudes, distinguished representatives of the churches and world faith, dear Mayor, dearest friends, we're living and experiencing troubled times, caught between grave concerns and hopes for the resolution of one of the most dramatic conflicts of our time. It would be an immense sign in an age which is characterized by the use of force that has rehabilitated war as the primary means of pursuing one's interests and designs. Some lights of hope have indeed been lit, but these are lights at the end of a tunnel. Mine is not pessimism. It is not pessimistic to note how much space war occupies on the horizon. We are in that age of force which has humiliated the institutions created to achieve peace. On the 24th of October, the United Nations organization celebrated its 80th anniversary. Its charter begins as follows: "We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save future generations from the scourge of war." These words flowed from peoples who have experienced war and its pain and felt it to be a scourge. For the Romans, the scourge was a terrible instrument of torture. The age of force is revolutionizing in a negative way languages and relations between peoples, undermining the culture of dialogue and diplomacy too. It has trampled international law, which is now treated as bureaucratic legalism when it is in fact the fruit of civilization. It has poured into people's souls a charge of aggression whose effects are yet to be understood fully. It has denied in practice that peoples have a common destiny, and it has done so with an ideology built upon the recovery of buried myths, of nationalism, of old and new fears. The age of force is strongly linked to the rise of global techno-capitalism. With lucidity and courage, the President of the Italian Republic, Mr. Mattarella, whom I greet and thank for being here with us, the Italian President, as I said, stated, "We do not want to surrender to the prospect of a society dominated by oligarchs, or rather by the privileged based on wealth, unscrupulousness, and indifference towards others, which is emerging by removing the values of equality, solidarity, and freedom." Close quotes. But if we look back, we'll wonder how ever we slipped into the age of force, into a society dominated by the few. The courageous, non-violent push that brought down regimes that stole freedom and tore down the wall in 1989 has triggered what we call globalization, a world connected like never before. But what has been achieved is indeed only a half globalization, only involving capital, technology, and the market. Half a globalization. Frankly, with prophetic frankness, Pope Francis said, and I quote, "The opportunities offered by the end of the Cold War were never fully seized due to a lack of vision of the future and a shared awareness of our common destiny. Instead, we gave in to the pursuit of particular interests without taking responsibility for the universal common good. Thus, the deceptive specter of war has reared its head once again, said the Pope, and he concluded, every war leaves the world worse than it found it. War is a failure of politics and of humanity, a shameful surrender, a defeat in the face of the forces of evil. End quote. That was Pope Francis. This striking definition of war remains as the legacy of a great pope. The unified world has not done away with war. An Italian scholar, Professor Schiavone, speaks of, and I quote, a world unified only in the great techno-capitalist centers of command, the mega-private supranational corporations, and for the rest is abandoned to complete anomie, anarchy, and total fragmentation, without any kind of governance that could hinder the power of the few. There are no alternatives in sight. Globalization has abandoned much of humanistic thought. We see this in the current lack of teachers in old Europe. It has abandoned the globalization of the spirit, the encounter between and among religions, which is a source of humanism and humanization, which places women and men at the center. Because at the heart of every religious faith is the value of the human person, not only in the Mishnah, but also in the Holy Quran. We find the belief that whoever saves a man saves the whole world. And this age of force is not anti-religious, as previous warlike seasons were, but it has learned to use religions to consecrate conflicts and interests. New religions of prosperity are growing to bless the race for self-affirmation. Success and money are at the heart. And unfortunately, the world of religious faith is affected by the process of fragmentation, with a reduction of ecumenism and of dialogue. There are no easy alternatives in sight, and this causes feelings of powerlessness that generate indifference, the alienation of the timid, the focus upon oneself. People, that is, no longer believe that there is much history to be written, but only a present to live in. Yet, religions come from afar and have a long history. They have cultivated faith in God and values such as peace and respect for humanity, and that through terrible times. And ours is definitely not the most terrible, even if we do not know what tomorrow will bring. No, religions come from a distance that is beyond the distant. They do not give up accompanying humanity towards the future. A great wit, as Abraham Herschel wrote, and I quote, "A single bridge has been thrown across the abyss of despair, and that is prayer. Prayer is the cry of anguish that becomes a perception of God's mercy." End quotes. Religions have fought each other. They have sometimes succumbed to violence, sheltered behind walls. They have despised each other. Of course, there have been notable exceptions, but sister religions make peoples more like brothers. From the 20th century, we have inherited something we are convinced of, something important. Religious conflicts, contempt between and among religions are now only the preserve of extremists whose hatred for human life highlights how theirs is not the God of the great religious traditions, but an idol that justifies power through terror. In the 20th century, walls between religions have cracked and collapsed sometimes. And this is no small thing. The humanist interest in them has been rekindled. In recent years, dialogue has highlighted convergences without, however, hiding the substantial differences between and among them. Yet, one way or the other, religions teach that evil cannot win, and the most hideous face of evil is war. War disfigures man. War is the mother of all poverty. On the 28th of October 1965, as Mayor Gualtieri recalled, 60 years ago, the Second Vatican Council issued a declaration, Nostra Aetate, that dealt with religions. Nostra Aetate begins with a remark, and I quote, In our time, the human race is becoming more closely united, and the interdependence of peoples is increasing. End quote. There is a perception of an imminent, incipient globalization affecting religions. What could be done? And the reply was, in Nostra Aetate, and I quote, "We cannot invoke God as the father of all men if you refuse to behave as brothers towards some of the men who are created in the image and likeness of God." End quote. This is what Nostra Aetate had to say, and in 1986, Assisi vividly and creatively represented these words of the Second Vatican Council. Nostra Aetate repudiates hatred between and amongst religions. It hates every manifestation of anti-Semitism. And that was the beginning of a season of dialogue, encounter, and brotherhood, which was not easy at all, after centuries of estrangement. The root of dialogue, says Nostra Aetate, is the following, and I quote, "The various people constitute one community. They have one origin," and end quote. Religions, in their irreducible differences, are aware of this, and dialogue, little by little, reveals that all peoples are one community. Dialogue is the meeting ground of religious faith, but it's also inherent, intrinsic to religions, as Pope Paul VI stated, and I quote, "Religion is, by its nature, a relationship between God and man. Prayer expresses this relationship in dialogue," end quote. The timid dialogue of the early years burst forth in the great meeting convened by John Paul II almost 40 years ago, on the 27th of October 1986 in Assisi, in whose spirit and in whose footsteps the community of Sant'Egidio travels, taking up the Pope's conclusive words, and I quote, "Peace is a construction site open to everyone, not only to specialists, to scholars and strategists. Peace is indeed a universal responsibility." End quote.
Sì, perché lo spirito
Yes, for the spirit of Assisi still blows. It is still blowing
venti di guerra.
despite the winds of war. And religions have a power of dialogue, a force of dialogue, unarmed but convincing, to be brought into play to achieve a much-needed transition,
Oggi necessaria.
a transition which is necessary today from the age of force to the age of dialogue and negotiation, from the age of force to the age of dialogue and negotiation.
Dialogo.
Of course, dialogue is not yet peace. It is the recognition that the other must be part of my future.
Mai senza l'altro.
Dialogue means never without the other.
C'è un grande
Dialogue detoxifies a world, writes a great war correspondent, Hedge, a world addicted to the powerful drug of war.
La droga obnubila.
The drug clouds the mind and makes us forget how necessary peace is.
Guerra è l'estremismo
War is the extremism of polarization,
quella polarizzazione
a reality
lacera le nostre società.
that tears society and even democracy apart.
Dall'età della forza
From the age of force and war to the age of dialogue and negotiation,
questa svolta dobbiamo
we must make our weight felt
con questa
in this transition.
indirizzare le nostre
Let us then direct our prayers towards this intention. We must bring about
comuni nella storia.
an eruption of ordinary women and men into history
Pensieri fraterni
through the practice of dialogue with fraternal thoughts, with visions of peace. In a fragmented society, as many are today, where the ego
capricciosi
dominates, the whimsical dimension of ego dominates, where communication is reduced to little more than social media,
la
where people shout and polarize, dialogue must return to the center stage in society and in relations between peoples. I remember that Francis,
venendoci a visitare tanti
when he came to visit us at the community many years back, exclaimed, "The world is choking without dialogue."
La gabbia in cui siamo è il
The cage we're in is pessimism.
ci fa rinunciatari
Pessimism makes us give up and pushes us to think that the world is lost to its demons, or perhaps
non sono così brutti.
that those demons are not all that ugly after all. To think that there is no grand design, so better save yourself.
Paul Ricoeur
A great teacher, Paul Ricard, said, and I quote, "However radical evil may be, it is not as deep as goodness." And religions, in the plural, have a meaning, which is to
dagli uomini
to release the goodness within human beings and seek it out where it is hiding, end quote. This is daring to make peace,
volontà di
releasing the goodness within, which is the desire for peace and for living together. This is our strength,
dall'età della guerra
which takes us from the age of war to the age of dialogue.
fare la pace
Making peace is not the magic of a single day or by a single man,
c'è il dialogo
but
già si gusta
when
il sapore della pace perché
when dialogue begins, we can already taste peace, because dialogue means discovering the other as oneself.
pensiere tedesco
A great German novelist who fought in the First World War, Erich Maria Remarque, gave voice to the combatants of
mondiali
all
nuovo sul fronte occidentale
world wars in his book All Quiet on the Western Front, a book that was even burned by the Nazis as they viewed it as dangerous. In that text, the 19-year-old soldier who discovers the humanity of the enemy says, and I quote, "Comrade, I didn't want to kill you. Why didn't they ever tell us that you are poor dogs like us, that your mothers are in anguish for you as ours are for us, and that we have the same terror, the same death, and the same suffering? Forgive me."
Kind, the acknowledgement of the dignity of the human person, recognizing peoples as equals, trade, exchanges, allowing mutual access to respective resources. And this, in the 1900s, vanquished the concept that in order to survive, it was necessary to fight to take goods and assets away from somebody else. Nationalism, to be opposed to other nationalisms, stems from considering other peoples as enemies or even illegal or inferior presences. To state with arrogance and violence claims for domination. For 30 years, all this seemed to be then relegated to the past. The end of the Cold War, with the dialogue between Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev, which led to increasing international interdependence that seemed to have ushered us into an age of peace. Today we are confronted with a very different scenario, in Europe as well. The theme of strength, power, once again, is considered as a yardstick through which international relations are measured. With the European Union, we have established a condition that has been achieved so far amongst its members, whereby weapons would be silenced forever. And this because of the democratic will expressed by its free peoples, not because of an imperialistic imposition or an imposition from a dictator who were the protagonist of inhuman experiments in the past century. Condition and values that have been so relevant, and they have influenced other parts of the world, triggering a situation that would lead to the globalization of rights, gradually bridging the gap between the peoples in the global north and the global south. This was not for sure a time that was devoid of tension and a high price that was paid very harshly by civilian populations, as it was the case in our neighboring Balkans. But through the United Nations and its organizations, the tools were provided for a persevering pursuit of a path of peace as an antidote against the temptation to use force and prevarication. Increasingly important protagonists over time were public opinion and people's movements for peace, communities, just like the community of Sant'Egidio, that developed pathways always towards peace. A very valuable commitment, which in the current geopolitical scenario more than ever seems to be indispensable. The spirit of Assisi which once again we celebrate in these gatherings, reminds us all that peace is not an achievement that is acquired once and for all without dedicating endless efforts to it. Peace must be pursued, cherished, and we must be daring in pursuing peace, to refer to the evocative title that was chosen for this gathering. As Pope Leo XIV has rightly said, we have to disarm our souls and words in order to pursue peace. And I would like to refer back to his plea that he expressed when he visited the Quirinal Palace a few days ago, so that we all continue to work to reestablish peace in every part of the world, so that evermore we will cherish and promote principles of justice, equity, cooperation amongst peoples that are necessarily at the foundation of peace. Hearing these words and looking at the instability, the tensions, the conflicts, violence, even verbal violence, that characterizes our current age, then we witness the spreading of attitudes that, if they applied to the coexistence in our national societies, they would be considered as thugs, people believing in acting in this way.
Risulta oscuro come comportamenti
And behaviors that are considered to be severely censurable in normal human relations, and we cannot really understand how such behaviors in international relations are considered instead as political facts, anything that would be unacceptable in our normal relations in our societies. And the word dialogue, instead of being considered to be synonymous with fortitude, now it's considered as synonymous with weakness. Fait accomplis and actions of strength tend to acquire the form of definitive situations, whereas they're only the premise for the explosion of future clashes. And this is our duty. It is our duty to counter them. With cynicism and senselessness, the toll in human lives of war oftentimes is perceived by the belligerents as an inferior price to be paid compared to peace. Let us ask ourselves, which prompts people to use humongous resources to be burnt on the altar of war instead of building peace?
occorrono cambiamenti radicali.
We need radical change in the mindset and also in the conduct that we choose. For sure, for peace, we need great courage and a lot of work. But peace is life, it is development, it is good for us. Wars, as we were reminded by Professor Riccardi, evoking Fratelli Tutti, wars leave our world worse off than it was in the beginning. And Pius the 12th, 1939, warned us that nothing is lost with peace. Everything can be lost with war. In the Near and Middle East, in Ukraine, in Sudan, and in so many other parts of the world. What will it take in order to restore relations between people? And I share the words of the Chief Rabbi Goldbeck. It is necessary to change and look for peace together. Today, the courage of daring peace acquires an even greater value. The news that we heard in the last few days from Gaza after the Sharm el-Sheikh agreements, with the first steps towards an agreement amongst the warring parties in the Middle East and the release of the hostages, remind us that peace processes need perseverance, patience, a work of mediation, and also taking on responsibilities. Institutions, diplomacies, and many other peacemakers, including religious communities, they fulfill this role day in and day out, quite often far away from the limelight and without having the ambition to be recognized in any way. But here also, I would like to mention Al-Tayeb, the great Imam of Al-Aqsa, to propitiate peace. When he spoke about interfaith peace and dialogue, he reiterated the need for everyone to raise the banner of peace instead of that of victory, and to sit at the table of dialogue.
Alla forza della prepotenza.
confronted with the strength of arrogance. Instead, we have to oppose this with the calm strength of institutional peace. The hope is that this spark of hope, as Pope Leo XIV defined it, that was ignited in the Middle East, will extend to Ukraine, where negotiations are having a hard time being brought to fruition, whereas the suffering of children, women, men, caused by the ruthlessness of Russian aggression show no signs of decreasing. What is happening right now imposes upon us to persevere in a common and balanced answer, inspired by a sense of justice and respect for international law, from the universal expression of human rights. These are the principles that the Italian Republic identifies with. The contribution of peacemakers who build bridges and weave relations between communities in conflict, peacekeepers who watch over the maintenance of peace and the protection of the most vulnerable, is absolutely precious, making sure that peace can rise even in the more hostile context. The message is clear: to the violence of arms, well, there's always an alternative road to the violence of arms, in a different way that is more beneficial to all to settle disputes, escaping fatal risk of uncontrolled escalation, whose effects jeopardize the survival of humankind. In the memory of humankind, the memories of the tragedies that characterized the last World War risk becoming weaker. Here we have Kondo Koko, Unibakusha.
Una sopravvissuta
Survivor from the nuclear bomb that devastated Hiroshima. Even what was a watershed in history today seems to be questioned. And we cannot but remember that making peace must include other aspects. If we look at the vast pockets of poverty in the world, the suffering of migrants, the growing concentration of wealth in just a few individuals, and also in specific, instead of being shared with everyone. When confronted with war and in favor of peace, religions speak with the strength of their authoritativeness, with the definition of peace as holy, the untiring pursuit of what unites human beings, the promotion of global solidarity. All of us, we are all called to renew our trust in the cause of peace. Let us make the plea of this gathering common and shared. Let us continue to dare to pursue peace. Let us continue to invest in pathways of dialogue and mediation, to support those who suffer, to build bridges between peoples, to contribute to a world where peace is not just a utopia, a dream for fools, but a shared reality, a reality where, as Pope Francis reminded us of, we recognize the dignity of every human being, when fraternity becomes the inspiring principle of an international order that is more just and sustainable.
Grazie.
Thank you.
Grazie per le sue parole, signore Presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your kind words. And now I have the distinct honor to hand the floor to Her Majesty Queen Mathilde of the Belgians
En Belgique, en
who has
septembre 2014,
inaugurated the ceremony on the Grand Place
parmi nous ce soir.
in September 1986. It is a great honor to have you amongst us tonight.
Monsieur le Président, Excellences,
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and
nous
gentlemen,
réunissons ce jour, non en
today we're gathered here
mais en gardiens
not to be just spectators of life, but to be wardens of history. We are connected by a holy duty to preserve the thin, fragile thread of peace at a time today when discord threatens us and fuels so many troublesome situations. The voice of the community of Sant'Egidio rises as a sign
si noble idéal
of hope
n'est pas un don passif,
and justice.
mais un pacte
Peace is such a noble ideal. It is not passive. It's a covenant among people and among generations. It is the art of reconciling differences, the art of turning the adversary into a brother in order to build sounder, much sounder links
avec son
than the forces that try to divide us. The community of Sant'Egidio, by its resolute commitment, embraces this goal, and this shows
l'esprit
that even in the darkest times,
le chemin à suivre.
human spirit may indeed
Cela est plus que jamais nécessaire.
illuminate the path to follow.
L'édifice de l'ordre
And this is more than ever necessary because the construction of the world of order, the building of the world order created
et l'ombre de
in the past decades is now being shaken by the contempt, by the shadow of war, and those alliances that used to be so sound are now teetering. Conflicts are increasingly threatening the equilibria that guaranteed our shared prosperity for such a long time. Amidst these uncertainties, we're called to make a choice. Should we take shelter and refuge in selfishness, or should we all rise together and defend the principles which unite us?
sont détournés à des fins de domination. Les plus vulnérables
Today, resources are increasingly exploited in order to dominate other countries, and the most vulnerable are marginalized vis-à-vis progress. The despair, the poverty of the people compelled to leave their lands, the destruction of our planet are not mere tragedies, they are actually the tangible expression of our collective failure. We have been unable to prioritize the common good. We should never forget that peace is not only the absence of war. Peace is the presence of justice. It is the guarantee of freedom. It is the promise for a future where everyone can prosper and thrive.
pour atteindre ces objectifs.
In order to achieve these goals,
Premièrement,
we should always
dignité humaine,
remind ourselves of a number of dimensions.
valeur à respecter.
One, human dignity should be the first value to respect. For peace, it's not an option, it is a moral commitment, it's an obligation.
Les besoins des plus vulnérables
Peace
au cœur de nos
compels us to place the needs of the most vulnerable right at the center of our exchanges. It compels us to invest into quality education,
bien-être mental et physique.
to protect health,
La mise en
the physical and mental well-being
durable des nations
of human persons.
doit aussi
It compels us
les États
to achieve the UN's Millennium Goals so that states may be helped to establish or preserve peace, to eradicate poverty and hunger, to reduce inequalities, to achieve sustainable and shared growth. All of these are factors of peace. Development and peace indeed go hand in hand.
Je souhaite citer à ce sujet Sa Sainteté.
I should like to quote His Holiness Pope Leo XIV in this respect, when he tells us that peace is always, that war is always a failure.
Au-delà de l'horizon du présent.
Let us now look beyond the horizon of the present time. We're constantly tackling new challenges such as environmental change, demographic changes, technology's increasing presence in our daily lives. These are all dimensions of our day and age. So we need a new vision and much courage. We should build a humanity not made out of arrogance and force, but innovation, progress, respecting our humanity. We should rekindle the flame of public debate at a time when truth is often hidden or concealed by disinformation. We should instead reaffirm the value of debate, of dialogue, of a critical spirit and the exchange of opinions and views, because it is only thanks to dialogue that societies may grow in mutual respect. It is thanks to dialogue that conflicts may decrease and that the seeds of peace may be sown. Above all, we should never forget young people. Youngsters are tomorrow's architects. They are the players, the actors of the future, and they hold so much potential. So therefore, let us give them the tools to build a world of greater equality and greater compassion.
De même, écoutons la sagesse des femmes, dont les voix.
Also, let us listen to the wisdom of women, because women have always been the quiet force behind every great struggle for justice. Women's inclusion is not a concession. It is a crucial condition for the future of our societies.
Mesdames et messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen,
n'est pas un slogan.
to dare peace is not a slogan, it is an appeal
La possibilité d'un monde meilleur.
launched by those who believe that it is indeed possible to have a better world, those who understand that the cost
Que celui de l'action.
of inaction is far heavier than the cost of action, which of course requires boldness and determination. But history will judge us based upon the heritage of peace that we will leave to our children and grandchildren. Thank you very much.
Merci. Merci, Majesté.
Thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you for your words.
Ora ho il piacere di dare
And now I have the great pleasure to give the floor to Professor Manuel Castells. He's a sociologist. He teaches at the University of California, Berkeley, and he is a keen observer of the social transformations that are characterizing our time and age. Thank you. I would like to give you the floor.
Buonasera.
Good evening.
Presidente della Repubblica,
Mr. President of the Italian Republic, Your Majesty, Mayor of Rome,
present here. War as the ultimate expression of violence is a permanent feature of human history. War is always destructive. That's why peace is our supreme good. In the 21st century, war continues and people continue to be killed by wars. Directly and indirectly, in this century, about 10 million people have been killed, including over 1 million civilians. And we witness every day major wars that are in process. In Ukraine, the endless, senseless war prompted by the Russian invasion has already killed or injured seriously over 1 million people, counting both sides, and including thousands of civilians, particularly Ukrainian civilians. We all have in mind the atrocious massacre and kidnapping perpetrated by Hamas against almost 2,000 Israeli citizens, which prompted an also atrocious massacre perpetrated by Israeli army in Gaza, killing tens of thousands of Palestinians, the majority of them being women and children. Largely unreported and underestimated conflicts in the last years, such as Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, Darfur, Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and a long geography of horror, have taken over 5 million lives since 1998. Moreover, humans, as we always did, are using the terrifying destructive power resulting for the new technologies produced by our ingenuity, such as drones, hypersonic missiles, satellite surveillance and guidance, artificial intelligence, particularly. As we speak, new war threats seem to be unfolding in Venezuela, and dark clouds over Colombia. Which are the main reasons that we know as social scientists for war making then and now? For people at large, fear of the other. That's a fundamental point, fearing the other. Neuroscience tells us that fear is the most potent human emotion, often induced and manipulated by interested warmongers, from political demagogues to the military-industrial complex. For institutions, including governments and political actors, is the drive to expand and deepen their power, be it in territorial terms or in the imposition of their will on other countries to appropriate their wealth, to influence their decisions, and to impose their values. Neuroscience also knows that the emotional antidote against fear is hope. Hope. Yet, hope in institutions of all kinds in our world, from politics to mainstream media, corporations, and even science, this hope is fading away, as in most of the world, in a trend that is amplified by the predominance of the post-trust culture nurtured in the digital social communication networks, where opinions and beliefs are constructed in our time. As a consequence of these developments, political actors animated by hatred, are coming to the forefront of the public life, undermining democracy and steering confrontation around our interdependent world, perhaps threatening maybe a global conflict in the years to come. What could be done to counter these destructive trends that threaten to doom our species and our planet? Here is where the role of faith, religious values, and religious institutions becomes more important than ever. Not that they escape to the crisis of trust, sometimes due to mistakes and sins of religious institutions themselves. However, 90% of people in the planet have religious beliefs, 90%, and 80% believe in one unique God. In a period of despair and hopelessness, the refuge in God is a potent source of generating hope. Yet, to mobilize this potential, our religious leaders, such as those present here in this interfaith meeting, should use all their influence in bringing political actors to peace. We need a courageous religious leadership to influence society at large and political and social actors to give priority to achieving world peace before it is too late. The community of Sant'Egidio has shown in a number of countries that it's possible to reach consensus and to end wars. As for us, common people, we cannot rely on God's help if we do not act ourselves. This is the meaning of the freedom that God gave us. We must engage in an open public debate, including the debate on social media. We must pressure our governments and our institutions in every way we can. And we must create a global, local peace movement beyond our ideologies and political preferences. And calling particularly on young people present here and around the world, who have the energy, the hope, and the freedom of a spirit to fight for their future. If we help ourselves, God will help us. If all of us hope and fight, with God's help, a peaceful world is still possible. Thank you.
Grazie, professore, per le sue
Thank you, Professor Castells, for your words.
Signore e signori,
Ladies and gentlemen, I will now
benvenuto a una
welcome one of the great voices of Islam
camminiamo da molti anni.
with whom we have been walking together, the great Imam Ahmed Al-Tayyib, the rector of Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt.
Caro grande Imam,
Dear great Imam Al-Tayyib,
2019,
on the 4th of February 2019, you and Pope Francis signed the document on human brotherhood for peace and world coexistence, also known as the Declaration of Abu Dhabi. It is indeed with joy that we are listening, we're preparing to listen to you, great Imam Al-Tayyib.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wassalam.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate.
فخامة سيد الرئيس سيرجيو ماتريو رئيس الجمهورية الإيطالية جلالة الملكة ملكة بلجيكا الحفل الكريم.
Mr. President, Queen Mathilde,
وبعد ففي بداية كلمتي
dear ladies and gentlemen, may the peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you.
والقائمين عليها.
At the outset of my remarks, I would like to express my sincere gratitude and appreciation to the community of Sant'Egidio and its leaders for their constant dedication to dialogue between and amongst followers of different faiths and cultures, and for their defense of eternal human values inspired by the revelation of the heavenly religions in their sacred texts. I am sure you will agree with me that the notion of absolute justice is the golden rule upon which the heavens and the earth are grounded. God has made it the guarantor of human rights in matters of equality, freedom, dignity, security, peace, and brotherhood among human beings, regardless of differences of race, gender, color, religion, of language. And you will agree with me, ladies and gentlemen, that contemporary civilization's deliberate neglect of these values has yielded bitter fruits. Senseless wars foisted upon poor and desperate peoples lacking the means to defend themselves against aggressors. Human beings with hard hearts and petrified consciences who mock human dignity and violate what God has forbidden to profanate in the heavenly texts and in His sacred revelation. Not to mention the economic crisis born of the absence of these values, and I mean poverty, unemployment, hunger, the division of the world between a rich and opulent north and the poor south, crushed by wars, famines, debt, disease, and pestilence, and again, environmental crisis due to the reckless exploitation of natural resources, and political crisis accompanied by tension, conflict, fear, intimidation, and vain expectations, all of them unbearable living conditions, and even by social crises that threaten the religious and moral beliefs and values of peoples, targeting the family as an institution, children, exporting alternatives and deviations that religions and morals reject, and that healthy human nature has never accepted from the time of Adam, peace be upon him, to the present day.
السادة الحضور إن الذي ينقص إنسان هذا
Distinguished guests, what modern man lacks are the values of justice, the absence of which has caused profound confusion in notions and parameters that help us distinguish between good and evil, beauty and ugliness, right and wrong, to such an extent that it's now commonplace to see injustice masquerading as law, tyranny, and the arrogance of power imposing themselves upon the weak in the name of the so-called world order, while atrocities and violations are justified in the name of, quote-unquote, interests and goals. The wars that have ravaged our peaceful East are a clear example of this. As soon as the first spark is lit, tragedies and horrors follow. Homes are destroyed. Families uprooted, children starved to death, and human dignity trampled upon before the eyes of the so-called civilized world of the 21st century. What a shame is freedom that denies the weak the sacred right to life and land. What a shame is a justice that allows and justifies such atrocities. And since nothing prevails over the law, the consciences of free individuals have risen up in the East and in the West. Women, men, children, and the elderly in various parts of the world have condemned the massacres in Gaza, Palestine, mass killings that have pierced the heart of man, wounded his conscience, and written black pages in modern history. This situation has been weighing heavily on our hearts for more than 2 years. And it unveils a serious imbalance in the structure of international order and the deep-set disorder in its policies. By now, world peace is hostage to power relationships, to profits from the arms trade and the war economy. All of this completely ignoring the criteria of law and equity, neglecting the voice of conscience and the natural instinct which God has placed in human beings, and the logic of reason that God has given to all human beings. These multiple crises point to a deep-set loss of direction in the world order, which has lost its way and by now is applying double standards, indeed 100 standards if necessary. This moral disease that has infected international justice can only be explained by hideous racism, which is in total contradiction of the laws of absolute justice enshrined in Islam, my faith, and in all divine revelations that preceded it, and in which philosophers such as Plato, Aristotle, Al-Farabi, Averroes have believed, and many contemporary Europeans intellectuals who believes in the ethics of duty and in the eternal human conscience have believed. At this point, I cannot fail to express my sincere appreciation for those countries which have taken the initiative to recognize the state of Palestine. I want to congratulate them over their boldness.
وأحييها على هذه الشجاعة التي تجسد صحوة
These bold stances
وانتصاره
embody the victory of human conscience in favor of the usurped Palestinian right, and we all hope that this recognition
على طريق
represents a concrete, a serious step on the path that will allow the Palestinian people to obtain their legitimate rights, first and foremost, the creation of their independent state with Jerusalem as its capital.
وأعتقد أن المجتمع الدولي اليوم
I also believe that
على أن
the international community today agrees
هو الطريق
that
الأوحد
the two-state solution
وفي العالم أيضا.
is the only way to achieve peace in the region and in the world. Ladies and gentlemen,
فإن
we should know that when justice is lacking, it is replaced by injustice.
وتتلاشى
With injustice, values disappear,
إنسانيته
and man loses his humanity, which is trampled upon by material interests and ambitions, as well as by arrogance.
وكذلك الاستقواء والاستئساد الكاذب على الضعفاء
When the weak are deprived of their rights
يسلب
and the oppressors are honored for having taken them away,
هذا الحق. وكذلك حين
when human beings become insignificant numbers in political calculation
وسلعة
or cheap commodities
عندئذ
in the market economy, then
أن الحق قد
we realize that justice has faded and declined
في فراغ
almost totally,
بانهيار
and that the world is plunging into an ethical void that heralds the collapse of systems even before the collapse of their ethical values. For all these reasons, Al-Azhar al-Sharif, together with the Council of Muslim Scholars and with the Holy See, have promoted the historic document of human brotherhood that I signed with my dear brother, the late Pope Francis,
فيها أن
in Abu Dhabi in 2019. In that document,
وأوضحنا فيها أن السلام ليس أمر
we reiterated that peace cannot be a passive situation represented merely by the absence of weapons or disarmament, which is impossible. Peace, in fact, is an active, an existential presence, namely the presence of justice. And we explained in that document that justice is not the victory of one party over the other, but the victory of man over the selfishness, the tendency to hegemony, and the materialistic goals that dominate our social, economic, and behavioral life. Ladies and gentlemen, today, artificial intelligence has become one of the driving forces of change in societies. We therefore have an ethical duty to use this technology to build a more just and equitable future for mankind. And we should realize that protecting our values and our spiritual and religious heritage in the use of these new technologies is not an option. It represents an ethical imperative and a great human responsibility. I do not exaggerate when I say that we are standing today at a crossroads of civilization. Either we allow this invention to reinforce moral and civil decline, or we use it as a lever to correct the path of humanity. Together with my brother, the late Pope Francis, we began to draft an ethical charter for artificial intelligence. However, his illness and his passing delayed its publication. Today, joint working groups from Al-Azhar, from the Vatican, and from the Council of Muslim Scholars are working to complete that document so that it may become a moral and global reference point to regulate a healthy relationship between man and the technology he has created, ensuring that artificial intelligence remain at the service of man and not be a sword of Damocles hanging over his head. In conclusion, today's world needs more than ever a justice to restore serenity and the living human conscience to understand that even the smallest injustice is a spark capable of igniting peace everywhere. Every oppressed person in this world is an open wound in the body of humanity, of mankind as a whole. The world will not recover unless it recognizes that justice is the supreme law of life and that peace is its natural fruit. In conclusion, the cause of today's corruption lies in the separation of morality and faith, maintaining morality but excluding faith. When ethics lose their moral compass, they become a tool for conflict, for the oppression of the poor and the weak. Thank you for your kind attention. May God's peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you.
Thank you for your words, Your Eminence. The time has come for a music performance. Very grateful to have a chance to listen to a great Roman composer who also received the Oscar, an Oscar for the soundtrack of Life is Beautiful, and from Maestro Nicola Piovani in this beautiful hall we're in today, whom we thank.
Grazie infinite di cuore di
Thank you wholeheartedly for having put music to serve peace. Let's go back to our formal agenda, and I would like to ask for your kind attention for a fundamental testimony. If we are convinced that indeed we need to dare peace, it's because we know that war brings destruction and death, causes unspeakable pain and suffering for the longest time, but even more so now. The time of so-called weapons of mass destructions. Hiroshima and Nagasaki are the names of two Japanese cities that will be seared in our memory forever because they have experienced the horror of the nuclear bomb in August 1945. We're truly honored now to give the floor to a hibakusha, a survivor, Ms. Kondo Koko, who survived the nuclear bombing in Hiroshima. Ma'am, thank you for being here with us, and I would like to give you the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm just so moved. I only have 5 minutes to talk, so I would like to record my childhood. 1945, August 6, 8:15 in the morning. I was in Hiroshima. I was only an 8-month-old baby. My father is the Protestant minister. That morning he was out early in the morning trying to help the people. For the parsonage, just my mother and myself. One of the church members visited my mother, so she decided to hold me in her arm. Then suddenly, whole house crashed. That means no lights are coming into the house. And everything was top of my mother. She was unconscious. Then my mother's whole weight was top of me. I couldn't breathe. When she realized that, she knew she had to do something. So asked for God, God, I don't care about my life, but please take care of my daughter. Then she needed help. She asked for help. No one came. She knew she had to get out, otherwise I could not breathe. She was able to make a hole. She put me out, and finally she got out. 10 years after, 1955, my father escorted 25 girls who were disfigured, whole body, by the radiation and the fire. So he escorted them to the United States for plastic surgery. My mother and 4 of us, the children, were invited to the United States. Next day, I will never forget, May 11th, 1955. I was at the big hall, just like today. Many audience are watching us on the stage. Highlight of the show was my father, who were in Hiroshima on that day. Another man, his name is Captain Robert Lewis, who was a co-pilot of the NRA. He was on the air. Those 2 guys met each other. The TV show called This Is Your Life. Kiyoshi Tanimoto, that's my father's name. They never met before. They were able to meet on that day. Ralph Edward interview asked the Captain Lewis, "How did you feel after you dropped the bomb?" Captain Lewis said, 8:15, they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. Target was T-Bridge. Then the NRA, the airplane, have to leave Hiroshima because no one knew what's going to happen to the airplane. But they had another order. They said to the NRA, please go back to Hiroshima to see that whatever you drop, they would like to know the result of this bomb. NRA came back to Hiroshima. From the sky, the Captain Lewis said he saw the Hiroshima city. Hiroshima was disappeared. Then he wrote it on his log. My God, what have we done? I was staring at him because since I was a little girl, I saw many, orphans, many people who were injured. So I said to myself, someday when I grown up, I'm going to find the people who are on the B-29 or again. I wanted to give them a punch or a bite or a kick. I thought, that's the only way I could do it. But one problem, my father is a minister of the church. And he's going to, bring a Bible and he's going to start, telling me that's not the, good idea, and so forth. So I decided I'm going to wait until I grown up. But when he was on the stage, he said, he said he wrote it on his card, on his log, my God, what have we done? And when I saw his face, I was staring at him, you the bad one. But after he said that, the tears came down from his eye. I was so shocked. Until that morning, I thought, they're the bad one, I'm the good one. But his tears showed it to me. He's not the enemy. I didn't know. I felt so bad because he thought, until that morning, at that moment, I thought he was the enemy. But he's the monster. His tears showed it that he's not the monster. After the show, I didn't know what to do. I felt so bad. 10 years old girl. I walked toward him. I just wanted to touch his hand. That's the only way I could say, sorry, sir, if I hate, it's not you. If I hate, I should hate war itself, which we human beings cause. Thank you. Today, for me, the children, they are the ones carrying this beautiful world. I want them to live through it. And here, today, we are, coming here to think about their lives. Thank you very much. Excuse me. Okay, excuse me. I would like to show one more thing. My mother kept it. This was I was wearing August 6, 1945. Thank you.
Grazie signora.
Thank you, Ms. Coco, for your touching testimony, inspiring us, prodding us even more to work for nuclear disarmament. And now it is my distinct pleasure to hand this over to Chief Rabbi Dr. Pinchas Goldschmidt, the President of the Conference of European Rabbis and the winner of the prestigious Charlemagne Award.
Mr. President, Your Majesty, Your Holiness, Eminences, Excellencies, Kvod Rabbanim, ladies and gentlemen, friends of the heart and seekers of the soul, imagine, if you will, a world not torn by the thunder of war, but cradled in the quiet hush of harmony. A world where swords are not just beaten into plowshares, but where the very soil of our spirits refuses to drink the blood of our brothers. Today I stand before you not as a scholar cloaked in dusty tomes, but as a descendant of, on one side, Judean kings, on the other side of Holocaust survivors, whose veins pulse with the age of my ancestors, a people who have danced on the knife's edge between exile and sovereignty, between destruction and dawn. We speak today of peace, of shalom, salamun, pax, not as a fragile truth scribbled on parchment, but as a fierce, unyielding flame that has kept our eternal light from flickering out. From the golden spires of Solomon's temple to the alleys of Roman Judea, from the graves of Beitar to the quiet corners of our own conflicted hearts, peace in our tradition is no polite abstraction. It is a battle cry whispered in the dark, a wisdom won through tears, a gratitude carved from the jaws of despair. Oh, how we crave it in a world that screams with sirens and scrolls of endless enmity. We know peace not only as an absence of war, but as the presence of something divine, a mending of the world's broken bridges and vessels. And we wonder, why does peace elude us like the thief in the night? Today, let me unravel three threads of this sacred tapestry of three types of peace. The peace between King Solomon and King Hiram, wisdom's forge. The peace between Yehuda, the rabbi of Judea, and Caesar Antoninus Pius of Rome, the subtle diplomacy of the soul, and the peace of Beitar, the willingness to bury the hatchet in order to survive tragedy and defeat. For in these, my friends, we find not just history's echoes, but the heartbeat of hope for tomorrow. Let us begin where the sun once kissed the cedars of Lebanon, in the shadow of a temple yet to rise. Picture King Solomon, the sage of sages, enthroned in Jerusalem's glow. The book of Kings whispers to us in chapter 5, and God gave wisdom to King Solomon, and there was peace between King Solomon of Jerusalem and King Hiram of Tyre. Peace demands the surgeon's steady hand, the poet's patient pen. It requires wisdom to see the other's face not as a foe, but as a fellow wanderer in God's vast garden. Solomon didn't just build walls of stone, he bridged chasms of the spirit. Punchline of the ancients: it is easy to make enemies. Anyone with a stone can do it. But to make peace, that takes a king with the heart of a child and the mind of a sage, disarming distrust one cedar at a time. And in that peace, what bloomed? A temple rose, not just of marble of gold, but of mutual respect, a beacon where East met West in worship's warm embrace. And here is the gut punch for our age. What wisdom do we lack today? In boardrooms of bombast and battlefields of bias, we hoard our herds like the miser's coins. It is enough to glance for a few moments into the abyss of social media and be confronted with unlimited hate, bias, and violence based on lies and conspiracy theories. But remember Solomon's secret. Peace isn't won with warriors' roars, but with whispers of we, the wisdom to say, your gain is my grace, and your loss is my lament. Now let us journey deep into the dust of occupation to the 2nd century of our era, when Judea lay prostrate under Rome's iron boot. The Great Revolt has scorched the earth, leaving scars deeper than the Dead Sea salt. Yet in this cauldron of conquest, a quiet revolution flowered, the peace of coexistence, fragile as a reed in the wind, fierce as a father's vow. Enter Yehuda Nasi, the spiritual line of Judea, compiler of the Mishnah, the guardian of our oral Torah, and his unlikely ally, the Caesar of Rome, Antoninus Pius. In the Midrash, we read that the rabbi dictates a letter to his scribe, and the letter read from Yehuda, the governor of Judea, to our Lord, King Antoninus. But the rabbi commands to tear up this letter and to write fresh from your servant Yehuda to our Lord, King Antoninus. The scribe gasped, why this self-abasement? You are the prince of our people. And the rabbi answers, am I greater than Jacob our father? Did he not bow low before Esau, saying, just as your servant Jacob? So, what we learn from here, the pride builds palaces that topple in tempests, and humility erects bridges that outlast empires. In that torn letter, it's not just inked words. He wove peace from the threads of the Torah by echoing Jacob's deference. He disarmed the dragon of dominion, turning a tyrant into a tablemate. This is the lesson of the second type of peace, of occupied people with the occupier. And they were locked in life's eternal dance, from whose table Rav marvels, neither radish nor horseradish nor bitter gourd were absent, neither in hot season nor rainy. Imagine it, the spiritual head of a subjugated people breaking bread with the emperor of the world, sharing not just salt, but the sharp sting of survival's spices. Yet they feasted together, these two leaders, proving that peace isn't bland politeness, it's a bold flavor of foes becoming friends. This act of subtlety saved us, my friends. Under these wise leaders and this wink at Rome, Judea prospered. Synagogues stood unmolested, and scholars wrote the Mishnah, the bedrock of our law, our lifeline through 2 millennia of diaspora. So, what can the oppressed people learn? You don't conquer Caesar with catapults, you convert him with courtesy and a side of sharp greens. And his legacy, that peace thrives in thrones of, not in thrones of triumph, but sometimes in humility. But let us descend into the third type of peace in our history, the most harrowing moment of all, the year 132 of our era, Bar Kokhba's great revolt, the desperate David against Rome's Goliath, ends in apocalypse. Beta Falls, a fortress of faith reduced to rubble and ruin, hundreds of thousands of corpses lie slain, their bodies a banquet for birds, denied even the dignity of burial. And what we see from here is that in the graves, which is recited by the Jewish people on a daily basis, there are 4 blessings. One blessing is, according to our tradition, established by Moses, thanking for the food. The second blessing by Joshua, thanking for the land. The third blessing established by King David and Solomon, of blessing the builders of Jerusalem. But the fourth blessing, as Rav Matena says, the rabbis of Yavne instituted a fourth blessing after the meal to say, Hatov Amitiv, God the good who does good. What does it mean? They established this on the day that the hundreds of thousands of slain people were given burial, and they did not smell, and giving blessing to God for allowing the burial of those slain civilians. But here's the question, the clause to all of our collective conscience. Why is this moment in our history so significant to be mentioned on a daily basis in our grace? One of the European rabbis, a survivor of the Holocaust, Yaakov Yechiel Weinberg, explained it the following way. After a failed revolt at great human cost, the tempers of the bereaved, seeking the utter destruction, could have influenced another and another revolt and another failed military campaign, bringing everlasting death and misery to the Judean population. The acceptance of reality is the beginning of wisdom. It was this message that our sages integrated in our daily prayer, which allowed us to survive and prosper in most difficult circumstances. So, because in Beitar's buried blessing we learn, peace arrives not when the enemy flees, but when their heart finds room to rest. Without this insight, grasping reality, instead of false, inflamed rhetoric, rage would have rotted us from within, turning survivors into specters. Instead, it planted seeds of resilience. From Beitar's graves grew the gardens of the Talmud, which turned into the teachings guaranteeing the survival of the people of the book. Today as well, the world is consumed with the voices of the extremists propagating war instead of peace, death over life, and misery instead of prosperity. Hate is consuming our world, making our streets unsafe, and questioning all the progress which humanity has made since the end of the most horrible of wars, World War II. So I ask you, as the sun sets on our shade's story, what peace do we pursue? Will we hoard Solomon's wisdom like misers or lavish it on the hirams at our gates? Will we tear our letters of lofty pride in the style of Rabbi Yehuda and share our bread with strangers in humility? Or in our own beitars, the personal revolts that leave us broken, we will bless the barely bearable, finding good in the grave's grudging gift. So, at this moment, sitting here in Rome with thousands of representatives of all the faiths of the world united here for the sake of seeking peace and finding peace. So rise with me then, let us weave this triad into tomorrow's tapestry. For in our heart, peace is no passive prayer, it's a passionate pact, a punchline against the powers of perdition. We choose the plowshare over the pike, the radish over the rampart, the burial over the bitterness. May God grant us wisdom to build bridges, subtlety to share our bread, and mercy to mourn our multitudes. And in that shalom, salamun, or pax, may our world finally whisper back, Amen.
Grazie, Signore Rabbino Capo.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Rabbi.
E ora,
And now,
ultimo relatore, ho il piacere
the last
di dare
speaker
la parola a Sua
will be
Eminenza
His Eminence Cardinal Matteo Zuppi, Archbishop of Bologna, President of the Italian Bishops' Conference.
Eminenza, siamo
Your Eminence, we're very pleased to listen to your words, and also thank you for your universally renowned work, constant work for peace. The first way to dare peace is never to stop seeking it. And as Father Turoldo used to say, this requires the night to pass by and everything makes sense, that wars end, that history has an outlet, that love will win over oblivion and life will vanquish death. Otherwise, we end up settling for having no problems, which is the opposite of peace, actually. The outcome is finding refuge in what Pope Leo rightfully called the globalization of powerlessness. It seems that we can do nothing, but that is not true. History is devastated by the arrogant, but it is saved by the humble, the righteous, the martyrs, in whom goodness shines forth, and true humanity resists and is renewed. Pope Leo says, the culture of encounter opposes the globalization of indifference, and today we actually exercised quite well, I believe. And the globalization of powerlessness is opposed by the culture of reconciliation. Today, well, this is a beautiful and great opposition. Year after year now, for almost 40 years, the community of Sant'Egidio has not stopped doing this. It believes in peace and dares. It dares with many seekers of peace because it knows well that one cannot live without peace and that war destroys everything and everyone, obscuring all humankind. We heard this, we have seen this, we carry this in our hearts. To understand the horror of senseless slaughters and also how useless they are, must we confront them and actually deal with this? Because slaughters are doubly senseless when we do not learn from them. How many dead people, someone used to say, will there be so that he knows that too many people have died? Let us, the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. And let us choose peace, because that's the issue. We have to choose peace. We have to fight against war. Its root causes, everything that favors war and makes it possible. Those who dare peace are those who seek peace, defend peace, build peace in daily relations, and also in the necessary architecture for peace that regulates relations between nations. Not just the great who seek peace, but the humble, because the humble know that peace benefits everyone. And humble people accomplish great things. I hope, actually, I'm certain of this, that there are many humble people who do great things. And also, I hope many great people who choose peace because they remember that they are humble. In recent months, we have seen in our countries many people take to the streets to protest against war. And let us not forget that if everyone is a piece of the one single world war, this helps us to be attentive towards everyone. God does not want war between man and man. God is aware of the instinct that dominates us if we do not dominate it. In our brother, we can see an enemy, an opponent, and God always helps us to find brotherhood, fraternity. And he asks us, where is your brother? Because we then become his steward, his guardian. He always looks for our brother and helps us to look for our brother. Where are the many Abels killed by the folly of war? It's a multitude of people, and we do not even know their name. God instead remembers everyone's name, and asks us, where is our brother Abel? This is why we dare peace, to answer God and answer like Abel. It's me. You're here. You're with us. I will defend you. I will welcome you. I will make you study because you are a piece of me. And this is peace. And this is where peace begins. We do so always for all of them, starting from the endless refugee camps of South Sudan, and also the forgotten villages of northern Mozambique, all of them, because we can hear the last breath of Abel. With his last breath, he asked for life and begged for peace. But it is also the groan of the maimed, the wounded, the orphans, the widows, those who do not know where to mourn or whether to mourn their loved ones. Many people who carry war in their bodies and souls. Primo Levi said this, war never ends. Who will collect their tears? God has a wineskin where he collects them all. Men? Well, I believe that a meeting like this is incredibly valuable. It is a wineskin of tears to be wiped away. We know that a meeting like this then cleanses the electric air of prejudice and ignorance, counteracts the producers of hatred and weapons, and is a bridge to debunk self-serving disinformation and bias. As Andrea Riccardi reminded us, all of us, that we can defeat the time of force in so doing. And lastly, choosing peace means disarming the heart from violent words and gestures, and basically getting rid of the seeds of hatred and bias, cleansing our memory, choosing justice and forgiveness, because only if we are disarmed, we can disarm other people. And actually, all of us, well, that's actually what people are waiting for, to meet someone who today will make us experience the future and will help us to look for it. Let us dare peace then. And let us say that if you if you have peace and war will always win. Let's abolish war within ourselves and between ourselves. We know this. War is emphasized by nationalism, by nefarious myths. The President Mitterrand used to say nationalism is war. Absolute sovereignty, the obsession for land or power, the ideology of race, ignorant contempt for whoever and whatever is different, then there is a role to play here for religions. Never be reason for war. Never let ourselves be manipulated for war. Let's stick together in this ambition for peace and in the many Abels entrust to us, this longing for peace. And we believe that peace is contagious. And we need an imagination for peace, to see the others, to acknowledge them, recognize them, understand their pain, and realizing that it's the same as our pain. There is no ranking of victims who died at war. And for them who have no voice but still speak to us, we're here to talk about peace. St. Francis and taught us to really practice peace and see the others. He thought that every human being was his brother or sisters, even if maybe he would be seen as an enemy by them. This is why he dared go to the wolf, because he saw him as his brother. And he realized why he was reduced to stealing and killing. Maybe he was afraid. Maybe St. Francis was afraid. But the power of love was stronger. The wolf was at war, let's say, and Gubbio was at war against him. St. Francis dared peace. He went to the wolf, calling him Brother Wolf, and also bringing the wolf to Gubbio, not another city, but where it had sown violence and death, to reconcile, to vanquish the roots of violence in tamed wolf who finds his home once again and his relation with others. That's the beginning of peace for all. And he taught to dare peace also to the inhabitants of Gubbio, who fed the wolf. Because the wolf was violent because he was hungry. And the first inhabitant of Gubbio who brought him food, he dared peace. It is possible for everyone, fratelli tutti. Let us dare peace, starting from myself and ourselves. Thank you.
Grazie, Eminenza.
Thank you, Your Eminence, for your words. Conclude this inaugural ceremony of our international meeting, Daring Peace. Thank you all very much indeed. Thanks to all the speakers who helped us during this ceremony to start along the way to listening to dialogue. We will continue tomorrow morning, starting at 9:30, and we hope to see you come in large numbers. Thank you. Enjoy the evening.